Blue da ba dee da 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 ba dee da ba. What a perfect time in the world when that song came out. Like not the year, not the era, but like that 5 minutes when that song was released.
I mean, according to the Matrix, our society peaked around 1999. And having lived through the subsequent 26 years, yeah, that's about right.
I feel like there were some high points in like 2008, maybe,
Yeah,
and that
like
was
the
kind of it.
the smartphones arriving and we're all like, "Oh my gosh, these are so amazing." And now it's just like stare into the nightmare rectangle and watch the real-time collapse of humanity.
Yeah, so I'm really appreciating the 3 minutes of peace I get with blue da ba dee ba da da ba dee da ba da ba dee da ba da. I mean, what else is there than that?
Bop.
It's perfect. But that song though is actually like weirdly introspective, you know?
Yeah,
It's
it
about like
actually is.
relationships and like the Mbop
Like
kids.
regrets and growing.
Yeah, yeah. But again, blue da but no introspection, nothing. There's just blue little house, blue little window,
But if he's green, he would die. Like that sneaks in there.
but he isn't. He's blue, so he's fine. Blue da ba dee da ba da da ba dee da ba. I mean, that is just that's all you need. That's all you, and it's all you're gonna get, frankly. So,
Well, shall we make a podcast before you get something else stuck irrevocably in our listeners' heads?
blue da ba dee da ba da. Sure.
All right, this is gonna be a solo episode. You got this. Hello and welcome into another episode of Gifted Kid, Messy Adult, a neurodiversity podcast, the show where potential went to die. I'm one of your hosts, Ellie Michaels. I use she, her.
I am your host, Jessica Michaels, and I use she, they.
Today, we're talking about procrastination via perfectionism. That's fun to say.
Yes, but not as fun to experience, I have found.
No, no, it
Nope.
is, it is, it is, it is living torture.
Yes, and so these actually come to us via the subreddit r/gifted, and there's actually two that I am going to read for us to talk about. Okay, so the first one is I am interested if anyone here has looked more in depth at procrastination caused by perfectionism, potentially stemming from being gifted. It took me a long time to realize it, but I believe a large amount of my procrastination issues stem from my perfectionism, which in turn could stem from the fact that I was discovered to be gifted at quite a young age, or may have always been a part of my personality. I am unsure. I thought this would be the best place to ask, as I've heard other gifted people struggle with similar issues, though I am interested in any perspective. I would love any book or literature suggestions, but sharing ideas would be great. Also interested in unique ideas on procrastination and how to combat it in general, since I feel like I have tried everything at this point. And then we have from subreddit r/gifted kid burnouts. Is anyone else here a toxic perfectionist? Like, sure, it's okay to have high standards, but I fall in the trap of setting them so high that I cannot reach them. Certainly not without excessive amounts of work, and then abandoning whatever I'm working on because it will never be up to my standards. So, clearly, the ideas of perfectionism and procrastination are things that are rife within the gifted kid or gifted adult community. And I definitely think within likely in, the autism and ADHD communities as well. So I think there's several groups that have this particular issue as something that plagues their lives. Is this something that you deal with, perfectionism that turns itself into procrastination?
Constantly.
Yeah.
Absolutely constantly. I think especially lately because I've been in quite a dearth of executive dysfunction or a dearth of executive
Function.
function, leaving me in a ditch of executive dysfunction. Um, where just there's so many things that need to be started, and I know I'm not going to be good at any of them. And so rather than face the humiliation of being bad at something, you just don't do it. And then eventually it goes away or becomes such a huge problem that it doesn't matter if you do it poorly because it has to get done. Otherwise, you're going to go to jail, like taxes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's speaking of taxes. I got our last bit of tax paperwork today, so now I have no excuse. The excuse I had been using to avoid starting on the project is that, oh, I don't have all the tax paperwork. Now, the paperwork I needed accounts for maybe 5% of what I need to do. I could have easily done 95% of the work and then gotten this last piece of paperwork and then just finished up. But no, I chose to procrastinate the entire project so that now I have many hours of work to do. Um, and I have no excuse now because my excuse has come and gone. Yeah, I think this is something that and I don't know why. This is my theory as to why it affects the gifted community so much is that a lot of us don't really have a good sense of this messy middle of how things get done. I think for a lot of us, we have kind of built a habit of doing things right the first time. And that's not, as egotistical as it sounds. I mean, it's a lot of the things that we were good at, the things that identified us as gifted in the first place, were things that obviously we did really, really well. And so we didn't necessarily need to iterate because why write three versions of a paper when the first version I write is going to be as good as what everybody else turns in? So I can just turn that in. Or if you think of taking a standardized test or something, that's something you do once and then you're done. This idea of things not being right and not going well and having that be part of a process, that's not really something most of us incorporated into our lives. Certainly not when most people do it, which is in school. I think part of what school is good for is teaching you things like that critical thinking process and that iterative process of, you do a project and, you maybe, have a second draft and a third draft and whatnot. And it's okay for the second draft to be bad or the first draft to be not very good because it's gonna get better. But most of us skipped that part. We also
Mm-hmm.
really didn't get rewarded very much for things not being right. I mean, that's so much of what we got validation for is being right. Whether it's, oh,
Mm-hmm.
we did the science experiment and put together this beautiful science fair project, you didn't get that if your experiment was bad or didn't work or whatever. Like, we learned very quickly that right is best.
Mm-hmm.
And combine that with a lack of appreciation for an iterative process or failure being part of what you're supposed to do, kind of forms this like super structure in our head that says only perfection is possible. And that makes it
Mm-hmm.
terrifying to do anything because what if you mess up?
It's there's famously a shot in the movie Alien Resurrection where Sigourney Weaver is like a clone of the character that she played in the other Alien movies, and they're playing basketball on like this space station, and she, while giving lines to somebody else, does a one hand shot of the basketball, like no looking, and it lands in the net. And you can see Ron Perlman in the background losing his mind because that wasn't supposed to happen. Like, that wasn't going to be a single shot thing. She was going to do that, and then they would cut to separate footage of someone just dropping it into the net. But because she did it so effortlessly and did it perfectly, Ron Perlman is losing his mind. And it's like one of the best movie trivia things ever. Also, Sigourney Weaver is like 6 foot. So, but point being, that was the kind of praise that we got, where you kind of just casually walk in and you shoot a perfect three, and then you just casually walk out. And people are like, "Oh my god, she's amazing." Whereas if you just do a good job, just like, "All right, there you go."
Hmm.
But you get the most head pats and the most recognition for being really good at stuff without seeming like you have to try. Because for some stuff we didn't have to try; it just happened.
Hmm.
um you're Mr. Bent in Making Money, where you just look at a column of numbers and they just resolve themselves without actually doing any thinking. um and so it's not just like praise, but it's like a reinforcement of like your sense of self. Like, yes, this is who you are, and yes, you are still good at it. It's why I love doing like things that you find super impressive, but I try to do them real casual, like, oh yeah, no, here's some homemade soup and a flatbread. Here, this'll help your cold. Uh,
It did help my cold, by the way. It
I
was
know, that's
actually
why I did it.
that's the only reason we are able to record a show today is because this is the first day in a week and a half that I can speak. So,
Garlic lemon chicken soup, everybody.
it was amazing. It was amazing. I did inhale an onion though, which is maybe
It's
a
part of the
problem.
process. There's
So
lots of
we'll
vitamin
see.
C in the onions, so your lungs pull it out
Right to the lungs. Yep.
right where
Um,
you need it.
yeah, we don't get much credit for the effort,
Uh-uh.
only for the finished product.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that is really hard to reinforce in yourself as an adult if that was something that wasn't there. The hard worker part. Like, I think it's better to have a hard worker than to be a smart kid,
Oh, a
honestly.
thousand percent. A
Because
thousand
a hard
percent.
worker can get to where the smart kid is probably, and that's reproducible. Because that's the other thing is I don't know how I did that.
No, it just happened.
And then that's really hard when your plan is to at some point catch lightning in a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't ever, you don't know what are the conditions that made that happen. So reproducing it seems impossible. Like, I don't know. I just sat down one day and there was, and it was fine. And so when that's your process, just sitting around and hoping to be inspired or hoping things get done, that is not a great strategy. And that's certainly not something that works for things like the chores that keep you alive or employed, and so it's really tough because it is so tied into that procrastination too that it just adds to that shame spiral that a lot of us have going anyway. Which, if there's anything that's going to keep you from being able to take a chance and try or do something, that shame and that, oh, I'm worthless. Oh, I'm not as smart as I thought I was, or I'm not as good as people thought I was. People thought I was going to be this successful person and I'm not. And, oh, I was supposed to be this really exceptional person and I'm not. I'm really pathetic inside. When that's kind of your the voice inside your head and then thinking of taking on something that you could do badly, what the heck? I mean, that just sounds like, the worst type of reinforcement ever. My self-esteem is already nothing. And so what's going to make me feel better? Doing something terribly? Probably not. But that's sort of what we have to reinforce in ourselves is that it's the doing that is the win. Adults rewarded us in the past for accomplishing, and that's great, and accomplishments are wonderful, but the thing that we need to kind of reteach ourselves is that the reward isn't in the completion necessarily because you can go from 1 to 100. It's that 2 to 99 that we really need to focus on. It's the doing and
Mm-hmm.
the iteration and the trying and the messing up and the failing. Those are the things that we need to reward ourselves and teach our brain that that is as desirable and as good as that amazing finished product that we used to be able to toss out into the world to impress everybody when we were, 10.
Yeah, it's something that I've seen called out for like my adolescence onward is people going, "Oh, we should not have done that. We should be praising these people for trying and for, trying again and persevering rather than, hey, you did the thing with no work. Excellent out of you." That just it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great word for it. That perseverance is so important. And I feel like a lot of us that are gifted, that just wasn't taught or wasn't necessary. Because if you think most, you're in the top 10% or 5% of people at doing whatever it is that you're doing, you don't need to persevere because it just is. It just comes to you. You don't have to work through difficulty or challenge. And then life, though, unfortunately, is very little of that stuff that we're good at and much more of the stuff that we just aren't really naturally inclined to do. And so, how do we make a life for ourselves when we don't have those skills?
There's a
Tough.
specific Japanese word here that would be perfect, but because Google is a nightmare now, I can't find it readily. But it's like when we first started playing Pokemon Go and you felt like you were really bad at it. And so your whole deal was going to be, I'm just going to catch a million Pidgeys and level up that way. And you did. Um,
Hmm.
and it's also like the key characteristic of Ash Ketchum in the anime is that like he's not very good at this, but he doesn't give up. Um, it is a short little word, but the point is that like it's just not giving up. It's you might suck at it, but if you keep sucking at it for long enough, you get better.
Hmm. Well, and there's, you know, the thing that I constantly repeat to myself and to you is it's a process.
It's a process.
And that can be a very helpful reminder is there are steps to this. This is something that isn't uh that doesn't just resolve in a minute, or in one. And so thinking of it that way can be can be helpful. Or if, something is multifactorial, you're not going to necessarily be able to just complete something because there are different components, and those all need to come together for something to be a whole. I think thinking of things that way is helpful. Also, I think too, taking all of the neurotypical advice, in books on executive function type things, talk about reward systems and how you should reward yourself. But again, a lot of those focus on completion. And I
Mm-hmm.
think for us, the rewards need to happen long before that. Rewards need to, because it isn't just that we can't finish projects, it's that we really can't start a lot of them, or we can start, but we have no idea what happens in the middle of things. We can start and finish, and that's it. There's no middle ground. So rewarding yourself has to happen in those middle steps. Like, it needs to be a bad first draft. I need to write a bad first draft. And if you can task yourself to write the bad first draft, then reward yourself or do your reward, I know, or do your reward while you're working. Like if there's don't reward yourself with a food after you're done. Like reward yourself while you're working on the project because that's
Mm-hmm.
the part that is important. It isn't just the task that is, the thing that we are rewarding. It's the actual work. So give yourself the prize while you're doing the work. But task yourself, that the bad first draft or the 60% version. That can be easier for our brains to think about is, okay, I'm not trying to do the perfect thing now. My job right now is to do the 60% or the 20% or the 10%, you know? Like whatever it is, giving yourself and training your brain to know that these incremental steps are the thing that gets you the same head pats that coming in with that A plus did when we were 8 years old. That can take a long time, but I think eventually your brain can start to see, okay, it's this middle stuff that we used to skip that is actually desirable.
I'm so averse to, first of all, I have like a pathological horror of looking like I don't know what I'm doing. But also, when you just said A plus, I think it was a combination of uh, the the '90s apathy and my gifted cool girl veneer that I'm like A plus. Who tries that hard? That just means that you're trying way, way too hard. I'll pull off like an A, maybe an A minus without any effort. And you know what? That's better.
Well, I mean, and that's, I'm glad you said that because that's the other side, right? Is that part of being averse to doing some of these tasks, I think, is because a lot of us don't have a sense of how much work we should be putting into things. And so sometimes the amount of work that we have put into things is so far beyond what we should be doing. So either, we think that, okay, um, I don't want to get started on this thing because it's 100 hours of work because I not only have to do the dishes, but if I'm going to do the dishes, then I really need to scrub out the sink. But if I'm going to scrub out the sink, boy, the wall in between the dishwasher and the fridge, sure, could use a good scrub, so I'm going to do that, and then I might as well then do the floor once I've done all the. And so all of a sudden, doing the dishes, which could be 20 minutes, is now 4 hours because we don't know when to stop sometimes. Or at work,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we want to solve all of the problems, you
All
know?
of the problems.
Like we can't just do the assignment. It's like do this spreadsheet. Okay, well, the spreadsheet is fine, but it would really be easier if we did this in Google Sheets because then so many people would have access to it. Okay, then all this would need to be reformatted. Oh, the internet is a mess and our page really needs to be reorganized. And okay, well, if I do that, then you've taken on 500 tasks, an overwhelming amount of work, an overwhelming amount of stress, things that most people aren't going to see or understand or take advantage of. And you haven't put the right amount of attention on the thing that you were given. So just working within the normal parameters of what needs to be done can also cause aversion to getting started because it makes everything seem like this Herculean effort when it doesn't need to necessary. We don't always have to be like Atlas holding up the world. Sometimes we can just do the spreadsheet.
Yeah. And like I said, pathological terror of being seen to not know what I'm doing. Um, but at the same time, like pride in the fact that I will say, I don't know what we're talking about. Could someone please explain? Um, but it's just the embarrassment of failure. Like it's I was running cross country in high school and I was never terribly good at it. Um, and I didn't know the course we were running, so I was just following the girl in front of me. And we got to the finish line and there wasn't a lot of people there, but I didn't think about that because I wanted to die because I had been running. Um, and then like on the walk back to, the school afterwards, uh, coach seemed miffed and I couldn't quite figure out why. And then I realized that the person I was following didn't do the last third of the course, just kind of turned and went and finished. And I didn't know the course. I was also running, not thinking very well. So I just followed her and it looked like we cheated,
Mm.
but I didn't. I just didn't know. But it was more embarrassing to be seen to be ignorant than to be like, oh, maybe okay, the coach thinks I cheated. Um, but I just wanted to come and like clear that up, be like, hey, so I didn't mean to do the thing, and it was actually her fault, but not really her fault. I don't know what she was doing. I just wasn't. I didn't know. That
Mhm.
haunts me to this day.
I could tell.
That's been 20, 21 years at this point. Um, and it just say you don't know what you're doing. It's fine. Nobody knows what
Yeah,
they're doing when they start, except for those two people who do, who I should be better than.
there's just so much that feels good about being competent, because that was what, again, a lot of being gifted is when you are good at things and you're good at things sort of in advance of your years.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people are amazed by. Like, oh, look at her. She's she sounds like she's 40 and she's, 7. And oh, look, and your prize for what you can accomplish and how much easier you can make people's lives and, all of these things. And none of that includes incompetence or not knowing what you're doing or being a burden or having somebody who has to, explain things to you or clean things up or doing things poorly. It's, so I think our self-worth sometimes is so precarious that there isn't a lot of room for not knowing what you're doing and being that person and for failing because the validation that we get and that we need is so critical and you only get it from doing these specific things, and if you don't try, you can't fail. I think
Mm-hmm.
is really the thing. So if you don't do the project, you can't be bad at it
Mm-hmm.
because what if you do the project and you find out you are not good? What do you,
End of the world. End of myself and my existence.
you know,
Unacceptable. Dungeon. 10,000
then
years dungeon.
does it mean maybe then you're not smart? And then what are you? That was the thing you had.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think we have a lot of rewriting to do in our brains and a lot of reteaching and retraining of our brains that the work and the steps and the middle is the goal, is the prize. And perfection isn't what we're going for. And if you don't think that's true, look around and see all of the other people existing in the world. When you look at the work that other people do, you will see that it is not perfection that is necessary. Like if you're a person who's ever gone, everybody that I work with is an idiot, or I work with morons, or just those moments where you're like, well, how would that be possible? How would everybody around you, being a moron, work if perfection were what was necessary to be
See,
successful?
but babe, I'm better than them. And if I don't do it perfectly right off the shot, I might not look like I'm better than them, but I am. And I know this, but I can't say that out loud because people get uppity about that. So I just have to show them up by doing everything perfectly, casually, with no actual setup. That's why you wait for the ideal, perfect circumstances to start something new. Clearly,
And how is that working for you?
it is not. Oh,
I mean, and I want to make sure we separate this out from this idea that the last minute is terrible, because sometimes when people talk about procrastination, the thing they say is, well, I do things at the last minute and that's bad, and I shouldn't do that. Like, I definitely had this where it's like, if I have a thing to do Thursday, I'm gonna do it Wednesday. I'm not gonna do it 2 weeks in advance. And so the thing, when I worked with a coach for the first time and she asked me, she said, and I said, I really, professional people don't do things at the last minute. Professional people do things well in advance, and that's something that I know I need to do to be a better human. And she asked me, she said, "Well, what problems is this causing for you? Do you miss deadlines? Do you not get things in on time? Do you not pay bills on time? What is it that is the problem?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't do things poorly." So the thing that I was really stressing myself out about was I need to be like everybody else. I need to work the way everybody else works. I need to do things the way everybody else does. And that's not true. I mean, if, it's one thing if you are stressed and you are causing yourself a lot of extra worry and you're laying in bed at night going, oh, I really should have gotten this done, and that's one thing. And that is a problem that needs to be, worked on and worked out just so you can, live a happier life. But if there aren't these problems, just the idea that the time you do something could be better isn't necessarily the problem sometimes that we think it to be because the last minute is still a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that better or worse than any other minute? If you do things better at the last minute, then just make sure you have that last minute free to do whatever you're going to do because that can sometimes free us from from a lot of extra shame about the way we are compared to the way other people are, generally neurotypical people are. So if you are, if these things aren't a problem and you do work best at the last minute and you're good about making sure you have time to do things and so you do them and the quality is what you need, if it's not causing any problems for you, don't let it be a problem for no reason. If it's a problem, address it, but don't make it a problem just because other people do things differently. We're not the same. We're not the same as everyone else. And we can't take these one size fits all solutions and try to make them apply to us. So the principles are good, but we need to make them address the things that we really need to work on. And for some of us, that's being bad at things. We need to become much better at being bad at things.
No, not gonna. Nope. Well, I think that'll just about wrap it up for this episode of Gifted Kid, Messy Adult. Jess, where can people find out about you?
People can find me at coachjessicamichaels.com and reach out to me if you would like me to come speak at your organization about neurodiversity in the workplace.
And if you like our show, please rate and review us. It really helps it show up on other people's suggestions. But for any other information, please email us your questions, comments, or just your outright praise to giftedkidmessyadult@gmail.com. And until next time, take care of each other out there.
Bye.